This is Gumball's Game Room, and this is Alf. He eats cats, but he don't like game cats, so you guys are safe. Welcome to Viewer Takeover.
Hey, you guys. Today we learned about the passing of our good friend Ken Eves. You guys know him as Gumball's Game Room. Loyal member of the community. He's been around for years, and we just wanted to express how much we're gonna miss him.
To anybody who didn't know Ken, he was an absolute joy to be around. He's been a member of our community for years, all the way from playing to the top back in the day to creating dreams for us and starting the hashtag GameCat and Dreams. And he was just, no matter who you were, he was always loving and supporting, was just a shining star in the community, and he will be sorely missed.
And I mean, this just kind of, to me, at times like this, we have such a great community and people pull together. And I really just want to say his family needs help right now. There's a GoFundMe that we're going to post. Please, if you have anything you can spare, just to kind of, I know how good a community this is, guys. Like, I know we can make this happen for him and send him off in the way that he should be sent off. So please consider donating. Thank you.
We love you, Ken. Thanks for being such a good friend.
Hey, fellow game cats. Don't let the cat out of the bag, but Viewer Takeover is next.
This is Viewer Takeover. We film every Monday night. We bring it to YouTube every Tuesday. It's Viewer Takeover. I don't know if that's how that works. My name's Brian Paul from this channel right here, PSVR Without Parole, and the guys to my right, the boys. Special guest, Joel Green, project lead for Cloudhead Games for one of our favorite games of the past year, Pistol Whip. What's going on, Joel? Thanks for joining us.
What's up? Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. I work at Cloudhead Games. We make lots of virtual reality stuff, so super stoked to talk to you guys today.
I thought you'd be showing up wearing a tux with a gun in your hand, like the guy in all the videos.
No, that's Dan. We have the guy in our first trailer is Dan. We call him our booth babe. He's actually our lead level designer, but he just happens to be a beautiful man, so we like to put him in trailers. Yeah.
Tell him he's gorgeous.
Yeah, I will.
And that guy next to him is Dave from Dave Station VV.
Don't you do it. Stop it. Stop it. So, Joel, I hate it when he does that, but he does it every time because I hate it. So
And of
anyways,
course,
that's me. I'm Dave. Hello.
And of course, on the far right-hand side of the screen is AJ from The Underground, PSVR Underground.
You working again, Brian?
Is that a quote? Are we referencing things again?
I have no idea what's going on, man.
I have no clue.
Joel got it.
Flying by the seat of our pants.
Sure he did. He acted like he did at least.
Right. That's what makes him a good guest, man. Listen, the first thing we want to do on Viewer Takeover is take a whole lot of people, and the first person we want to thank, of course, is I Am Batman, I Am GameCat, for that awesome Viewer Takeover introduction. I'm going to assume that's not what he really looks like.
I think it might be a filter. I'm not totally sure. It looks like it might be
be.
a filter.
I love the beard.
You can see
Either that or he's got the most interesting beard I've ever seen in my life because it's really tight and well groomed up here, and then on the bottom it's just like mine.
It's craziness.
Stupid.
Is this game out?
Listen, if you want to submit your Viewer Takeover introduction and have it introduced next week's show, make sure you send it to withoutparole@gmail.com. But of course, I Am Batman, I Am GameCat is not the only person we want to thank. I have to do it every time. We also want to thank
I like the voice.
these people down here, the people into patreon.com/withoutparolegames, and they're the ones giving us $1 or more every single month, just like our Patreon leaders, Joshua McCrory, MTM the GameCat, and T. Flaros. Remember, we don't need your money, man. Well, maybe we need it, but we're not asking for it, that's
Brian
for sure.
needs it.
Yeah, no, listen, we're going to keep the lights on one way or another. We don't want any of your money. Just to be part of the community is enough for us. But if you like what you see and want to keep the lights on, $1 a month. Patreon.com/withoutparolegames. AJ, who else do we need to thank before we really get the show rolling?
We would like to thank those who support us in another way by changing their name to something GameCat, something GameCat related, or something GameCat adjacent, as you or something GameCat adjacent would like to say. And this week we have 2 new GameCats to welcome to the GameCat Dojo.
This one's gonna be fun.
But of course, now that we have a special guest here with us, we would like Mr. Joel to go ahead and read these new GameCat changes.
I'm so sorry, Joel.
Okay, I'm doing it. I think I have the right ones.
And if you pronounce them wrong, you're off the show. I'm sorry to say.
Oh, shit. Okay.
There's kind of a big deal here.
Okay, Gundy we das GameCat Wetter.
Perfect.
And
That was actually really good.
Got to be English,
yeah,
right?
very
That's
good.
Totally
I mean, we're
English.
assuming it's German, and I think you put the German touch on it just right. Very good job there, Joel.
Thank you. And Julia the GameCat.
Excellent.
Nice.
Well done. I think that was
that one.
maybe the best one.
This is one of my favorite GameCat name changes weeks because, first of all, when I saw Julia's new name, I was like, okay, that's top tier GameCat name. I love the sound effect in there. And then Gundi Wedas GameCat Weather. I don't know what that means, but I Googled what wetter means in German, and it means weather. So maybe it's like GameCat season or something like that.
It's raining GameCats.
Could be. Yeah, could be.
This is
Oh, the
season
kid,
of
the
Game
Julia
Cats.
one is like a radio. Okay,
Yeah.
I got it now.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was
It's
happening.
clever. We don't usually get stuff like
I'm a
that.
sound designer, and I should know. I should
There
know
you
that.
Listen, if you change your name to something the GameCat or something GameCat related or something GameCat adjacent, as AJ said, make sure you put hashtag GameCat in the comments below so we can give you a shout out on next week's show. Well, we're not going to give it to you. Some other random developer is going to do it. And apologies to future developer, whoever that might be. But we're going to make you do it. Joel, before we really get to the viewer questions, we want to just kick it with you for a second and figure out what's going on at Cloudhead Games, man. Lots of stuff going on over there, right?
Yeah, we're super busy as usual, as we always are. For those who aren't familiar with us, we've been around since about 2013, I think. We have to be one of the first VR game studios ever. We were literally, incorporated back when the DK1, like Oculus DK1, was the only VR thing that existed.
That was
so yeah, we've been around
I remember that
for a while. It was very much so. We've been around forever. We're mostly situated in the Vancouver Island area in Canada, but we have people kind of all over the place. We've made the Gallery series, so Call of the Starseed, Heart of the Emberstone, and we also did Aperture Hand Labs with Valve. We made it's the tech demo that you get with the Index controllers, and most recently Pistol Whip. So we've been working on Pistol Whip for the last 2 years or 2.5 years or something like that. It came out 2019, end of the year, and since then we've just been pumping out content nonstop, trying to make the game better. And if you don't have it, please check it out. It's all over the place. It's on PlayStation VR. It's also on all the other big platforms, Steam and Quest and all those places.
And even if you haven't played in a while, definitely go back for this new update that they added, the campaign.
2089. Oh my
good.
god.
Oh my god. This is like my favorite. We'll get to this at some point, probably during the show, but this is like my favorite thing you guys have done.
That's awesome. Thanks, man. Yeah, it's we're
so
super happy with how it came out. It was a bit hard to describe to people that we were going to put story into Pistol Whip. There were a few people that weren't so sure about that idea, but we were, really careful about how we did it, and super proud of the way it turned out. Everybody's happy with it. So
yeah, I mean, I love those.
Thanks a lot.
The way you guys told the story through those cutscenes, like anytime something with a comic book art style has 3D depth to it in VR and is telling me a story, I'm like, okay, I'm in. Like,
yeah, it was really fun to figure that out.
But yeah, it's a great way to deliver that, and just great job.
Thanks, appreciate it. Yeah.
And actually, I really enjoyed when the story bled into the levels itself, and we heard the narration as you were starting off, and to really feel that was different for me in Pistol Whip, and it made me feel something special. I thought the Pistol Whip was fine, and I really enjoyed it for what it was, but I really felt like you guys hit your stride with the 2089 update.
Thanks.
Well, I appreciate that. Maybe it's not just what we thought it was. It's like a template or a substrate for other kinds of experiences that we didn't expect out of this.
Totally.
I mean, I can't wait to see more of what you guys are cooking up over there.
Yeah, for sure. We really saw the launch of that game as a starting point. It's kind of the most bare bones product that we could make it in terms of hey, this is super fun and it's totally worth buying and it's awesome and we know people already love it, but we already had this mountain of things that we wanted to try with it. So we're just super grateful that people love it and it's given us a chance to actually do that. We've had I think we've been working on it for 14, 15 months now after it already came out, and there's no end in sight. Like the stuff we're doing now is even crazier than what we've done in the past. So yeah, feel super lucky and really appreciate all the support from all the fans, and just feel lucky to be part of a amazing team at Cloudhead that's killing it with this game. We had a lot of experience making story games, before this, and that's part of why we were confident we could turn Pistol Whip on its head a bit and add that stuff into it, is because we had a lot of years making those gallery games, and we learned a lot about how to tell a story in VR, what works and what doesn't. And Pistol Whip's like a super distilled version of that, right? Like 2089 is these 20-second long cutscenes for the most part that lead into the gameplay. But you're right that figuring out, the challenge was less about how do we make a story and more about like how do we get a story into an arcade game in a way that doesn't bog down the action and keeps it constantly moving. And so we actually, the cutscenes, like the writing was actually started out being way bigger, right? And then we just like distilled it and pared it down to like what is, every word was criticized to be like what is super important here to get enough story across that people feel good about it. And then also trying to make sure the gameplay lined up with the story in terms of, which modifiers were on and which scenes and kind of when you got your weapons and all that kind of stuff. So it was a super fun challenge. Really happy with how it turned out. And there's more coming, I can say. I can't say exactly what's coming, but we're not done yet by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I got to tell you, people will pay for the next DLC. You don't have to keep making it free. You guys have given us so much already. I'm just saying, like I would have
paid for it. Yeah,
we've heard that. Yeah, I appreciate that.
So for me, it was such a treat because of all the Pistol Whip has so many movie references. I love action movies. I love Die Hard. I love John Wick. There were so many, there was Blade Runner, so many different things. Even a Mad Max thing going on there. Fury Road was amazing.
In the campaign, I was feeling almost like a John Carpenter vibe too. I might be off on that, but I don't know.
Absolutely, all those influences are in there.
I don't know. There's something about the noir kind of. I don't know.
But of all the things, the one thing that I wanted, and you guys read my mind, I was like, where is the Terminator? Where is Terminator? One of the best things. So not only was it such a treat with the story, of course, the final fight of that campaign was just absolutely mind blowing. Changed up the gameplay for me. But I got my sci-fi Terminator robot fix, which was so awesome.
Totally, man. The dev team was absolutely, all those influences were in there, and it actually started closer to like a Blade Runner type thing in a city, but it slowly just turned into Terminator, and we were like, we're not going to stop it. We're not going to stop. Like, why stop that from happening? At the end of the day in Pistol Whip, you're always going to be destroying, hundreds of enemies per scene, so that has to make sense in some context of a story in it. And we just love those movies, man. Like this team's full of people that love action movies in that same way, and Pistol Whip, as you can tell, is kind of a love letter to all that stuff. And the base game was John Wick, right? Like we all know that. Like that was the huge inspiration there. Kind of feeling like John Wick looks
and stuff. The movement, right? The dodging, it does make you feel like when he's running through a room and taking out 12 guys and just kind of dodging left and right. Yeah, it definitely has that feeling.
That's why it starts out with single pistol as the default, is because that's as soon as I was playing and I got this, I felt this, what it was like to kind of cradle a hand. Like that's something I've never felt in a game before, outside of light gun games in the arcade, right? Because that's the only time you would have gotten that.
We talk about
right.
this all the time.
So as soon as you got that sense and what it felt like to actually try to use kind of real movements, that's what's cool about John Wick, right? Is it's actually more realistic gunplay than what you would see in like a John Woo movie. And we still allow people to use dual wielding, just so everyone knows you can grab two guns if you want to. And a lot of people love to play that way, but because it was a John Wick kind of core, we started with that. But now it's just what else can we do? What other action movies can fit into this formula, right?
Well, I gotta say, you were talking about John Woo, and I just saw Face Off, and I don't know how you can say that movie's not realistic.
Yeah,
it seems very realistic.
Yeah. That's a classic. It's true. No problems with John Woo movies, but but yeah, the John Wick thing, it just felt like it hadn't really been done in games that well yet, and especially in VR. You know, it's just it just worked. It felt good from the early prototype days. So, but yeah, now it's just like, well, you know, we've kind of done that, you know, and it's awesome and it's there, but you know, sci-fi, and you can imagine like any other kind of action movie scenarios that could fit into Pistol Whip, and we've either thought about them or we're already making them. I'll just put it that way.
Well, that's good news.
Cool.
I like hearing that.
Yeah. I would love to hear some good news about the gallery coming to PlayStation VR.
Are you allowed to?
He means that too.
You've got this
means
wildly successful, you know, IP now with Pistol Whip, and it's probably like, I'm just going to assume it's way more successful than the gallery ever was because it just caught on fire. Is there even a reason for a company like Cloudhead to go back and be like, you know, maybe PlayStation VR gamers would like this game that we already made and ported over for us?
Absolutely, there is a reason. There's a lot of reasons. We're super proud of those games still. You know, they had their issues, but I actually am still like really proud of what we did in those games, and a lot of people still reference them in terms of, you know, VR games that have done storytelling well, and I would love to see them jump onto PSVR. I can say that we've been so close to making it happen, but it's a real challenge due to how complex those games were. They were developed during that kind of early period of VR where there was, like when we were making Starseed, like Steam VR barely existed. We had a Vive with circuit boards hanging off of it, and everything was just kind of like make it,
you were just like,
you know, the best you can. There's a lot of hacking stuff together, and our engineers are amazing, and they you know, they still made what I think is one of the better looking games in VR, like way back then. But it's a very challenging game to try to port, you know, because it's just a very complex engine. But beyond that, it's also just that, you know, the market, as you guys know, is still nascent. It's still a growing thing, and the gallery games were super well received critically, and they did all right. Like, we're still here, you know, as a company. That we wouldn't be if they hadn't, but it just hasn't quite made sense yet to bring it over to PSVR. But we would all love to. That's the thing. Like, the team still really loves those games, and you know, I wish I could say more about what the plans were for that franchise, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if you haven't seen the last of it.
No, I mean, I totally hear you, man. Yeah. PSVR 2 launch title, heard. Totally heard.
Yes. Yeah. When PSVR 2 is around, you know, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Just got to convince the suits.
Right.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. The suits.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for answering a few of our random questions about Pistol Whip and Cloudhead. You want to talk to the viewers and see what they have to say this week?
Yeah, let's do it. Viewer takeover. I think the Immersion one, right? That's what I'm doing?
Yes,
that is correct.
From Donatello the Scientist Game Cat from Discord. I've noticed immersion varies from person to person, but is there a point for you where immersion could go too far? Do you want photorealistic graphics or immersion level that tricks the brain into thinking what is happening in the game is actually happening to you? Would it be okay if the immersion created positive outcomes? I've thought about this so much, obviously, over the last 7-8 years that I've been doing this, you know, in VR specifically. And I think there's different kinds of immersion in VR. And we, you know, not to talk about our products too much again, but like the gallery, we really were attempting a certain kind of immersion where we were just like, let's take people to a place, right? Like, let's take people somewhere, give them an environment to explore, and like, you know, try to fill it with as many little details as we can so that they get a sense of actually being in this place. I'm the audio lead at Cloudhead as well, and you know, I put everything I had into making those games sound as immersive as possible, so you really felt like you were in those places. And same, you know, obviously the art team and everybody did the same thing. That kind of immersion, you know, is awesome in VR. But there's a whole other kind of immersion, I think, which is more what we went for with Pistol Whip, where it's like your survival kind of lizard brain type of immersion. And it's a very different thing where you're instead of kind of looking around and looking at like each little object and, oh, that looks so real and cool and whatever, you're just like on your heels trying to survive. And there's something about being put in that state where your body is actually moving and you're like legitimately just dodging things and trying to survive, where to me it's almost even more immersive. And it's why Pistol Whip doesn't need to have the realistic graphics that like the Gallery series aims for, because you're not seeing any of that. You're just kind of like in the zone. You're just seeing the bullets and the enemies and the things that you need to see, in the same way that when you're playing sports or in like a real life fight or something, you're only seeing like what's right in front of you, right? It's so that kind of immersion I love in VR. I think that is super cool. I think it's one of the most unique parts of this medium that you can't really get in any other medium. We've all been in the zone with like traditional games as well, but using your body, having to use your body in that way, I think adds to it in a way that you can't replicate in other mediums. So that's the thing that I'm super interested in exploring, is like, how far can you take that, to the point where people are just so immersed that when the level's over or whatever, they come out and they're just like, holy shit, like I was gone there for the last 5 minutes, whatever it is, right? Versus the kind of like, more slow looking around at a perfectly realistic environment and think that stuff is so hard to hit because of all the uncanny valley, issue. The more you can stop and look at it, and especially in VR, the more you notice how it's not real. So I think the more interesting kind of immersion is the stuff that has to do with your actual body and gets you moving. So I would love to answer the question. I think that, there's absolutely a lot more room to do there. I think that if games got to the point where you couldn't tell the difference, or you were actually losing yourself in the cerebral way, like where you actually kind of forget, I think that could start to cause like serious mental issues, to be honest. Like I think there'd actually be danger there if people were sort of not sure what was real and what was not. Like that almost sounds like it could get dangerous to me.
Well, I mean, depending on like your underlying kind of, if you already have some concerns there, but then also like the addictive properties of something like that,
just
are
exponential.
like off the charts, like insane. So
yeah, I guess, I mean, when I think about this, my brain automatically goes to horror games because that's what I like the most. And thinking like, how can they be scarier? How can they be more immersive? How can I forget that I'm actually in VR? I want to be in the Baker estate. But then I guess this conversation does sort of concern me a little bit, because I mean, people who have been through these traumatic experiences, if they leave a game like Resident Evil thinking that they've just been through a traumatic experience, they could very well end up with like a severe case of PTSD, and like then it's not fun anymore. it's now affected your life. It's not a game. But I feel like for people like me, I want it to be as traumatic as possible. Right? It's like I need it. We've experienced the scariest things on the face of the planet. Like now, you got to make them scarier. It is almost like a drug. It's got to be like next time we're chasing the dragon, it's got to be higher and higher every single time. And now I'm like, man, how immersive can you make it? Like give me the photorealistic graphics. Give me haptic gloves where I feel something hit me. That kind of thing.
There's a degree to which you want everybody to be able to play something, but you don't want to not be able to play something because it might be too much for someone else, right? So like I totally understand where you're coming there with Resident Evil 7 and all that stuff.
People are already there.
For me it's more like when we talked about that game with the bum fighting. Remember the bum fighting game? This
Down
is
and out.
When the immersion goes too far for me, where it's like, if you're putting me in a scenario where, regardless of what the graphics look like, regardless of how immersive the game is itself, if I'm doing something in VR that feels like atrocious to me, like participating in bum fights or like coordinating bum fights, then that's the kind of thing where being embodied can be a problem. Like I don't want to be there, and that would be a huge turnoff initially. So I think that for me, it's more about subject matter and like what they're trying to do with it. Like I as far as the last question here, the positive outcomes, I think that there's a huge potential there to embody people and have them experience something that they wouldn't have normally, that gives them a different perspective on things. Like I've heard, and this is not gaming oriented at all, but they've had experiments where they'll put police in the shoes of a kid walking down the street, and like they kind of get to feel what it's like to be somebody else, and like putting a woman into a man's body and a man into a woman's body, and they have these coordinated movements to make them feel like they're embodied, and like those kind of things I think could really create positive outcomes. But if you're letting people beat up bums in VR, then that's not going to create a positive outcome. So it goes both ways. I think there's plenty to do on the spectrum. Some of it is not good.
To piggyback off that a little bit too, I have seen cases where there was gamers with fear of heights, and they played like to the top where there's a lot of verticality and stuff, and they were like terrified at first to do it, but then they got used to it, and then it ended up being like one of their favorite things, and heights in general became something that they were a little bit more comfortable with. So that's always like my number one example of how a game could have more of an impact. But for me, I'm kind of with Brian here. Like, I understand. I totally agree with you guys that, there should be like safety measures. There should be stuff for people that, there should be red flags or caution, like proper cautionary things. But for me, I personally, some of my favorite experiences have been these really intense situations, like in Detached, where you're floating out in space and it feels like you're controlling a spacesuit like simulator thing, and it gets really intense. Like that is one of my most memorable experiences, or the horror games, or being in these worlds that look so real. That is honestly what I like, kind of like love VR for, is being able to be in these different extreme situations that you wouldn't be. And when it comes to like realistic stuff, like I know it just means like it looks good enough to look like it's real. But yeah, I wouldn't want to like just be like in a normal, downtown New York. Like I would love to be in some like hyper realistic, like fantasy setting or something, some world to immerse myself and escape into something like that. I am all about that. Yes.
But you're still also talking about just to the edge of immersion, like believing that you're there, right? Like you guys, you're not talking about actually coming out of it and a week later not being sure if that was a real memory or not.
Right.
That's kind of what he's getting at a little bit here.
Yeah,
right. I think, which is like, because I totally agree with you guys, like getting to that edge and having those moments of being totally in it, but then like you come out and that was a simulation, right? But what happens when it's like you actually aren't sure later on if something is a real memory or not, right?
I think it could end up going too far. Yes. And you got to be really careful, but not to change, but I was also wanted to agree with you about you saying the gameplay. I think the gameplay is also the other half of that. The other way to complement that is like a fun game to play. And if you have it like more interactive, more actual physical body movement, more things to pick up and grab and touch and mess with, that is the other half of that I think is also really important for the best experiences.
I just think it's great when you're talking about like if you're not sure it was a real experience. Like I think anybody who's got a good head on their shoulders isn't going to be like, oh my god, I was being chased through a graveyard by skeletons. I can't believe. It's like we chose to go into the game. You knew it was going to be scary. You did the whole thing. But I think if you take it to another level and you say, man, I was on vacation last week and it was beautiful, right? And you got the sense, you felt the sun, and the whole thing happened, and you never actually had to leave your house, but you came out of it well rested and relaxed. It's like these are the positive benefits that Donatello is talking about, I think, where you could take a virtual vacation and just, in the most stress-free way possible, because
you're literally talking about Total Recall right now. Actually, what happens, and we all know how it turns out.
And that ended pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone in Star Trek even has ever taken a vacation to Risa without something go horribly wrong.
That's true. Yeah.
But I mean, but still, you know what I'm saying is that like if you've taken a real vacation, you know full well that like, man, the room's not going to be clean when you get there, or or some you miss breakfast, or you like all these little things that can go wrong that just irritate you when it shouldn't. You could take a perfect virtual vacation and hopefully be way cheaper than like the thousands of dollars it takes to like bring the whole family on vacation. This would be an awesome future.
We just have to trust the developers to make these games for entertainment and not brainwashing us. to become
brainwash
like
away, man. Do it. I'm ready.
killing machine.
There's nothing up here that I need. Okay, so like brainwash.
If the military isn't already trying to figure out how to brainwash soldiers with this shit, then I would be surprised.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's always somebody whenever there's a new medium that's, extra immersive and AKA good at, useful for manipulating people, and there's going to be people that find ways to abuse it. But
The
I
defense
think
contractors come out of the woodwork, and then
yeah, what I'm hearing is there is a line where that it's almost like right up to that line is just better and better and better, and then at some point, if it's like you literally can't tell the difference between your memories of real things and fake things, then maybe that's bad. But like everywhere up until that line is just potentially really awesome. I do think, just to touch on the last thing about the positive outcomes too, and I know this is what you're saying as well, Brian, that like one thing this conversation always reminds me of is drugs, because psychedelics, because people use psychedelics to essentially have experiences that help them get past certain things, in their mind, or open their mind in certain ways. And they're actually used now in a lot of therapy, like more and more from what I've heard. It's actually like controlled psychedelic usage, and it's, I think, even why LSD was developed originally. But so I think there's potentially super positive things that could even potentially come out of experiences that are so far gone, so realistic, that you do really believe you're there for that period of time, as long as they're kind of supported as you come out. Because as we all know, those kinds of drugs can also be horrible if you have a terrible trip and you don't have the right environment or people around you when you come out of something like that. So I think there's definitely a use for immersion, super high immersion levels, like even beyond that line, if it's done in like kind of a safe way, I would imagine. But who knows? Well, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, and I think
Gambling, sports, all these things can kind of be considered the same kind of, can have that same effect if not using and done responsibly.
Well, but also on the flip side, like there's no way I would say gambling in sports should be given to somebody who's in a hospice, or somebody's in the hospital, or can't move properly. Like there are all these applications, I think, medically speaking, for people just from a mental health perspective. Like if you're in a situation where you're hospitalized, you can't go anywhere, having a VR headset would make a world of difference. You can experience things, and
Absolutely.
like that kind of gets you out of that feeling of being trapped in the bed. And I think there's so many applications beyond just gaming for this technology that are going to be hugely beneficial if people like develop them and seek them out and roll this stuff out. And I know there already is some of that, but more and more is better.
We're all going to start microdosing VR.
Yeah, let's microdose.
I think people are going to develop drugs that are specifically designed to like make you lose the last bit of disbelief, essentially, because combining drugs. I'm not condoning drugs in VR, but I'm just saying,
listen, none of us have ever done drugs, guys. None of us have ever done any drugs.
Yeah, but I think getting over that last like little bit to the point where you really actually believe it is probably easier to do that via somebody will figure out how to do that via drugs specifically, versus like, because the next thing is like plugging into your brain matrix style, right? Which seems like it's still a little ways off.
I hope you guys don't mind if we roll into the next question.
Indeed.
This one comes to us from Savage Rooster VR from last week's Viewer Takeover. Writes hashtag Viewer Takeover. The last few months now, I haven't been feeling the urge to get into VR. I was one of the ones hoping No Man's Sky would get PSVR support years ago, as well as Minecraft and a few others. I feel like we now have more than ever, but I just can't get myself to play. Haven't even touched Until You Fall. What is wrong with you? Do you ever get into these moods and push through for YouTube? How do you get back into the game?
I'll get mine out of the way real quick. I've definitely had moments where like I'm kind of more in the moment to some flat game that I just started playing or whatever, and I get I'm sort of a dilettante with games. I don't sit there and play No Man's Sky for 500 hours in VR. I want to try out something new, even though I know these things are great. But for me, like what gets me back into it is the social games. Anything that has a social aspect to it, like our community is great because there's almost always somebody willing to hop in VR and play something with you. Whether it's on Quest or PSVR or wherever it is. That's what's been getting me back in, I guess, is just like during quarantine, during all this stuff, having some social outlet, or having people around is always helpful. And the VR experience is really good for feeling like you're in kind of like an embodied conversation with people in real life, more than just talking on the phone or something. So that's lately what's been drawing me back in, is kind of social experiences.
Joel, what do you do when you get burnt out from working on a game? I guess we can kind of restructure this just a little bit for you. When you get burnt out of working on these games all the time, or when you feel like you need to mix things up, what do you do? Come back fresh.
Yeah, it's a bit of a different problem, yeah, for developers often, and this is not just in VR, it's in traditional gaming as well. But there's definitely the thing of you're literally all day at your day job, you're in there, and some days, depending on what part of the product cycle it is, you're literally like in the headset a lot of hours during the day. So you don't necessarily want to get into it again outside of that. But it depends on the developer. Some people, that's what they do, that's their thing in the evenings. For me, I'm a family man. I got a bunch of little kids and a wife, and one of the things about VR that we still need to solve is how do you make it into a social experience, not just online, but as a in a local setting. It just really isn't really yet. You can cast to a screen, and that's amazing. There's great features in that way, but it's still, for me, not at the point where I'm gonna like put on the HMD and the whole family is gonna watch me play some game in VR for 2 hours, whereas we can sit down as a family and play like a JRPG together, and everybody's pretty engrossed in it on the TV. So I think that's a bit of an aside, but it's I don't usually get burnt out in terms of playing recreationally because I'm mostly doing it during work. Like, to be honest, I spend so much time in the headset playing games and making games during the day that I don't really get into I don't go home and tell the family that I'm off into going back into the office to go back into the headset, So I think it's a bit of a different problem for us than it is for the regular consumers.
I'm just glad to hear that you're already getting your kids up to speed on JRPGs.
Yes.
Very much so.
Yeah. The next generation is coming out strong, guys.
I'll just say that when Pyra and Mythra were revealed for Smash, my kids already knew who they were. So
nice.
Yeah. What about you guys?
I'll take over for a second.
Sorry, Tornado's trying to pull this place apart. My bad.
Okay.
Carl is just sitting over here peacefully.
There she is. Who's our good girl?
He likes to try and lay inside my Quest if he can, but right now he's not doing that.
What do you got, AJ?
So yeah, I definitely experienced burnout occasionally, and usually what ends up happening is I do like to mix in like a little bit of a flat game or something, or a non-VR game every now and then, and like I'll really enjoy it, but for about like 2 hours, and then I'm like, okay, I feel recharged, reset, and then I'm ready to go back in. And of course, I've got like pets and stuff, go for a walk and mix things up, go take a drive around, blast some music. And so you really I just like to incorporate a little bit of something else. If I eventually hit that wall, just try to mix it up a little bit, whether it be non-VR gaming for just a little bit, or go outside, walk around, go on a walk, stuff like that, and I come back fresher than ever.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing that's helped with the channel too is I always felt like it was just on my own terms and never like obligated to post at a certain schedule or anything. And just sort of like when I feel like playing something, I'm going to get on and play something. And I know that that's not like a great way to grow a channel or build a fan base or anything, but like, it keeps it fun for me, so that when I decide I want to do something, it's because I want to do it and not because I know, oh, well, this is coming out this day, I have to do a stream of this, and I have to do a stream of this, because sometimes I just don't feel like it. And I think, obviously, Brian doesn't have that luxury, because this is, the day job for our man over here. But
do you guys feel like the hardware is a big, like just pulling it out and getting it on, and like that whole physical thing? Like, do you feel like that's an issue for people? Like,
Depends
is it
on-
for you? And
It's not for me or any of us, I think, because we just
Yeah.
have it like always, like
Not
sitting
for
right
me.
there. Like it's
you
Yeah.
got
ready
it
to hook
set
up
up
at
right
any time.
so
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
can just plug it in. It takes 2 seconds to get going. Obviously, the Quest is a little faster. You just plop it on your head.
Yeah,
But then you got to
It's
worry
noticeable,
about did I charge it last night or like stuff like
yeah,
that.
for sure.
So I don't really have that issue, but I can see people who don't use it often kind of
I
storing
think
it away
yeah,
and
exactly.
being like, oh, a new
For
game
some
came out. I
people.
should set this up, but it's going to be a hassle. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow night. Like
Yeah,
that
and
sort of-
yeah, exactly. Yeah, the hardware I think is still a little bit clumsy in the early days in that way. And yeah, if you don't have enough space in your living room that you can just keep it out all the time, then it kind of goes into a drawer or a closet, and then there's this big like friction to get back into it, right?
Yeah,
but
For sure.
I mean, I'll just say too that I agree. Like, you said going for walks and things. I've had periods in my life where, not just with VR, but with gaming in general, where everything I start up, I'm just like, I don't know, I'm not into it. I just can't get into it, and I'll start like a real life hobby. I got into woodworking for a while, and I was super obsessed with that, and it's the only thing that I wanted to do. But then eventually I always come back to gaming.
Yeah.
Like, it's just that's where my love is, and it always, I would say to this person, like, if you don't feel like playing VR games right now, just don't. And if you'll probably eventually come back to it if you love it, and if you don't, then there's no stress about that. It's just do what you want to do.
Yeah, that's I think the best answer we could have gotten there.
What I think really, I don't know if this is Savage Rooster's problem too, but sometimes I just don't think the games are there for VR. If you want to go on like this 20-hour, like super immersive, single player, narrative driven journey, something along the lines of the God of War reboot, or
Yakuza.
yeah, sure, Yakuza.
Just playing that this weekend, tons of it.
Like it, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like The Last of Us, something like that. Like there's not really those really high quality.
It's a really good point. Yeah.
Right, and like those are some of my favorite games in the world, and I have not played them. I haven't played any of them because they're not in VR, and I don't have time. I can only find time for those games if they are in VR. And honestly, sometimes I'm just like, man, I want something more substantial. And so often we go through these long stretches of time with VR releases where the games might be fun and addictive, and they might have like cool arcade qualities about them, pistol whip, but they're not like these long adventures, where it's like you feel like the character, like the person that's in it,
Yeah.
and find out these emotional connections you could have to other NPCs and that kind of thing. Those games don't exist very frequently in VR.
If they do, they're ports of flat
Yeah.
screen games,
Yeah,
like
right.
like Skyrim, and I'm sure you guys have figured out why that is, but it mostly just comes down to the chicken and egg problem of having enough people to sell a
Right.
product to. You get something like Half-Life Alyx, mostly because Valve is so involved in VR and believes in it so strongly that they were willing to put a huge amount of money and effort into making that game.
Yeah.
But there's just not that many companies that are willing to take that risk yet, because there's not a lot of proof that it's going to pay off. But that's changing fast, I think. And
Yeah,
as the
absolutely.
market grows, over the next 5 years, I guarantee you that we're going to start to see more and more of those bigger experiences. People will experiment with the format and push it a little more, and then eventually I think it will catch up. I do wonder though, like, are people going to want to spend 100 hours in the HMD in the same way that they will in front of a TV? I'm interested to see if I don't necessarily think that VR is just going to end up with the same kind of games as flat screen games. I think there's going to be new genres and kind of different preferences, in terms of what's really popular. And one of the things I question is whether or not people really want to be in the HMD that much, or if experiences that are a little more, concentrated are the things that end up being more popular in VR. The things where you can pop in and for an hour or something and get some super intense experience that you couldn't get through the flat screen game, but the kind of depth isn't there as much. I don't know. Eventually, probably both, but it'll be interesting to see as the hardware gets more and more comfortable and easier. Less friction. Yeah,
it's tough with something like that because, like, in VR, there are certain things that just become just like eradicate your patience immediately. That
Yeah,
wouldn't in a
yeah.
flat screen game. So like if a tutorial's going on for too long,
Yeah,
or if you're listening to a cutscene that's just like a disembodied voice somewhere, or
totally.
these kind of things that happen a lot in VR that typically would be a kind of narrative vehicle in a flat game. You know, these cutscenes or stuff like that just doesn't really work.
It's
And so
exactly why 2089 is the way it is because we had a rule from the beginning. I was like, I am not standing in a void watching some cutscene or listening to somebody talk to me for more than like 15 or 20 seconds before we get back to the game. Like I don't, anytime I'm in VR and that happens, or there's a big thing to read or something, I'm so much less patient with it than I am with a flat screen game.
Yeah, and I think that that's going to be something that I don't know how you just overcome. Like people will remain. It's not like people are just going to get better at being patient with that stuff. I think
I think it's new approaches to to storytelling. It's things like that that are going to solve those problems more than that, plus the comfort of the HMDs, things like that.
Yeah, see, I'm already there. Like if one of these games that we're talking about, you know, you're saying, well, did somebody spend 100 hours in this kind of game with the headset on? That's already me. Like that is no problem whatsoever, and that's with PSVR current gen technology and move controllers, right? So you know, lighter headset, wider field of vision, higher resolution, maybe wireless, you know, analog sticks, like all of these things are just pushing me forward into that. And I'm really, really excited for that kind of stuff. And I know that as much as like we're looking for like, you know, new types of VR experiences, I've been playing video games for, you know, almost 40 years, and there is certainly so many existing genres that we still haven't seen, you know, or even we haven't seen great examples of. So, you know, as much as I'm like, yes, push the technology forward, push the genre forward, think outside the box. I'm like, in my book, we still don't have great single player first person shooters. We have a couple, but not a lot, you know?
Yeah.
Well, the other part is there are genres that don't exist yet that VR can facilitate.
Right.
And seriously, I'm sure there are. I mean, we haven't seen many of them yet, but we've started to see the edges of them, I think.
Also existing ones. You mentioned
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
You mentioned JRPGs earlier.
Exactly.
That's something we haven't seen yet. There's so many amazing already designed worlds that we haven't even seen yet, have yet to explore with VR, let alone, like you said, new ones that will take form as the years go by.
Yeah. As a developer, I can say that it's the idea of just taking like an existing genre like a JRPG or even like a big kind of single player FPS and just being like, we're going to make that in VR it's often been a recipe for disaster, like for people to come in with that mindset. And I think that's why you're seeing less and less of it these days. Like I do think that there's going to be ways to make all that happen. But as soon as you put what are FPS games about right now? There's so much about locomotion and moving through an environment, right? Like so much of your agency as a player is not just about shooting, it's about moving around in the environment. And that part of it, you know, whether, you know, there's certain segments that are totally fine with that, but I can tell you as a developer that there is a massive, probably majority of people that can't even play that game because it makes them so sick. And that is something that you can't just get by. You can't just get around in any sort of easy way. So the devs are kind of constantly pushing into, you know, how do we solve that problem? There's some games that are just like, I don't care, we're just going to do it. And the people that can play the game, they're going to love it, right? You get games like Onward and Population 1 and you know, all kinds of games that you know, they're doing great, like, because there is a lot of people that can play them and love them. But there's another side of development that's kind of like, how do we make something new that doesn't make it, you know, this huge percentage of people sick, but also gives people what they were getting from that genre before, right? Which is a harder problem, I think, and something that's going to take more and more time and iteration.
Especially giving them more, trying to deliver more.
Yeah. And it's just so risky to jump into that right now and say we're going to make this huge FPS single player game that is going to make 60% of its players nauseous, like to the point where they can't play it. Like you pitch that to somebody who has money, and it's a tough sell. It's just a tough sell, right? So there's but there's people going both ways. You look at Boneworks, you look at Half-Life, and all these. Half-Life was really tried to solve the problem in a bunch of ways, at least to give people options. Boneworks was kind of just like, we're gonna go all in on giving you the VR fantasy and not really caring about if it makes certain people sick. They just went all in, and people love it. Like there's enough people that love Boneworks that's now a viable business strategy, right? So I think you might see both directions happen at the same time.
So to answer your question, Savage Rooster, go for a walk.
Yeah, get out of there.
All right, Dave, who does the final question come to us from this week?
This comes to us from Peepo over on the Discord. He has left a comment in the Viewer Takeover channel, and he says, what would your favorite PlayStation exclusive be turned into a VR game? I feel like we've heard this before, but what are you guys thinking?
I mean, I dug into the back catalog pretty far.
Oh, okay.
And
are you pulling out he's pulling out a game.
Pulling out 2 games. And the first one is going to be Extinction, because once upon a time, Sony wanted...
Extermination.
Damn it.
Extermination.
The first one's Extermination. Damn it. Extinction's a different game. It's once upon a time, Sony wanted their own Resident Evil, and that's, I think, where this came from. And all I can think is...
I've never heard of that game.
Oh, damn. Well, you're going to love
PS2?
Yeah, Extermination. Sony first party, made by Cambridge Studio, I think. It was definitely like a action forward Resident Evil style game with some decent jump scares, and all I can think of is, man, this would be great in first person with aim support. It looked pretty decent at the time. And real quick, before I let you guys talk, is the other one was another kind of hidden gem favorite of mine, and that was Ghost Hunter. I got the name right this time. Ghost Hunter. I read it.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, and Ghost Hunter is another great first-party Sony game. Very Ghostbusters-like, a little bit of humor, but man, just stunning visuals. And you got basically a proton pack, and you hunt ghosts, and it is very, very cool. Man, and again, that aim controller, it just reeks of a proton pack. I just want to go around and bust ghosts.
Yeah.
And so why not? Why not? Sony's got this amazing stable of IPs that they just let die. I mean, mostly because no one bought them in the first place. But bring them back, man. Let's give these games another shot. Anyway, that's my rant.
Mine's quick and easy. I'm gonna say Shadow of the Colossus. Can you imagine climbing the things and the scale of everything, like having motion controllers and you're literally grappling your way up the side of it? I cannot imagine how cool that would be.
I bought it 3 times. Also, I guess I'll have to buy it a 4th.
Honorable mention, Last Guardian would be great too. They had that Last Guardian VR experience that was
I was thinking about it.
Just the size of Trico and the scale of that interaction would be really, really cool in VR.
So what you're saying is anything Team Eco has made is it's time to bring it back again. Okay.
I mean, Ico is less exciting as a VR proposition to me because it doesn't have that sense of scale.
You don't want to hold that girl's hand and run around the castle for 6 hours.
Get over here. Get over here.
What about you, AJ? We'll go right down the line here.
Oh, man. It's a tough one because there's so many Sony exclusives. I struggle with this sometimes because there's been rumors all the time. And they usually, when they talk about a rumor with the VR game, it's usually some game that has an iconic character that you see from the third person view, and not a first person game. To me would make more sense. But I would love to say something like Uncharted, because I love adventure, and I would love just the cinematic, watching a boat tip over, or escaping from thing, or being in the Sahara Desert, or jumping out of a crashing building or something. And that is to me the ideal kind of experience that I go for. But because Nathan Drake is so iconic, I mean, it would just be hard to put yourself into their shoes. When I was playing Hitman, I didn't really feel like I was Agent 47. I just felt like I was just some badass Hitman dude. But I feel like I would go for Resistance. I feel like you could make a original Resistance story, have that little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of horror, of course, just a really action shooter. Not typically what my first thing that comes to my mind, but I feel like that's just the most practical and would make the most sense and would work still really, really well.
Sirens on my end. Sorry. Joe, we got you go last. So you have more time to think about this before you had to answer.
Yeah, sure.
What are you thinking about, man?
I mean, yeah, there's so many that I would love to see. My developer brain is just constantly like anytime I think of something, I'm like, yeah, but this problem and yeah, but that problem, and so it's hard. It's hard to like get it through. But I'll try to ignore that a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of genres just in general, you know, that I would love. I want to see, like, fighting games don't really exist in VR yet, and Sony has, like, you know, Tekken like alone is. I mean, I guess that's not an exclusive anymore. But it's like fighting games in general. You know, there's like that's a huge genre in flat screen gaming, right? And nobody's really figured out, like, is there a way to do that in VR that's really interesting where you know, it is one-on-one or like Smash style, like more than that, and you know, coming up with something that's actually competitive, kind of melee brawling is really interesting to me. There's obviously a lot of opportunity with the hand controls and everything. It would have to be kind of ground up, I think, but I think that genre in general is really interesting, and getting anything like Tekken or Soul Calibur or something into that would be super cool.
No, I see the obstacles, especially, you know, punching and dodging. It's like, okay, that would be easy. But then you've got like how are you going to do Eddie Gordo's capoeira? Like what are you going to be like flipping on the floor and stuff? Yeah, that's definitely a hurdle that is going to be a hard one to get over.
Well, okay, so you're initiating moves with a controller input or something instead of doing them, and your character starts
right. Like you see like a leg like flip up or something.
Like
yeah,
disorienting.
I could definitely see a lot of upper body. You'd have to design around upper body with punching, maybe different moves, weapons, stuff like that. You just have to really, like motions, hand motions and stuff. So it's
something
doable.
There. It just has to get thought. Like, but maybe it's not the right answer to the question because it's more about like a genre, thinking of it from the ground up. But like someone's gonna make an awesome competitive VR fighting game that, you know, is going to be rad. Why not with one of Sony's great IPs? Another one, I'll say again, it's like back to genres. Maybe it's because of my dev brain, but nobody's figured out, other than Moss, nobody's really done good platforming in VR.
Astrobot.
Sorry, Astrobot is the one exception, and they've done great work, and so Crash, Spyro, Sackboy, like those Ratchet and Clank, like those kinds of games. So many good Sony IPs there that, you know, how do you do that in VR? I don't know. That there's a lot of, like, Moss does it by giving you kind of a third person perspective where you're still controlling the character, and same with Astrobot, right? Where you're controlling the character, but you're able to sort of interact in the world as well. And I think that's a really cool approach. I'd love to see more games in that stable of kind of platformers, 3D platformers, just pushing on what Astrobot and Moss have done, and seeing where else they can take that. And then, like, is there a version of that is not that setup of me looking down at like kind of a diorama, but something where you're actually following the character around. I don't know if you guys ever played Lucky's Tale. It was a really early game on Oculus on the Rift back in the old days, and it was it tried to basically be the Mario VR, and it made a lot of people super sick because the camera was constantly following, you know, this fox around. The game itself was okay, but no one's really cracked that. Like, Astrobot did a great job, but I'd love to see that go even further and bring in Crash, bring in Spyro, bring in Sackboy. I just played through the new Sackboy game with my kids, and it was so rad. I would love to do that with, you know, in VR. It'd be super cool.
Well, I promise I'm not going to talk about Marvels because it's time to end the show. Before we get going, Joe, where can people keep up with you? Is Twitter the best bet for that?
I'm on Twitter. We have a Discord, a Cloudhead Games Discord, that we love for people to join in. I'm fairly active in there, and a bunch of the devs are in there. I am on Twitter, not quite as much, like to the point where I have to look up what my Twitter handle is right now. McNerdburger. I'm at McNerdburger on Twitter.
Nice.
I do post things from time to time. I'm on there. If you DM me or anything, I'm there. But
Nice. We'll make sure
yeah,
to put the
mostly
link
on the
to-
Discord and the Twitter.
Yeah, we'll
Sure.
put the link to the Discord
Thanks
in
a
the
lot.
description below for sure. So if you want to keep up with Cloudhead and Joel, that's where to go.
And Ashley wanted me to plug one more thing,
Oh, yeah,
which
do
is
it.
that next week there's the Virtual Athletic League Summit next week, which is a big kind of a week-long bunch of tournaments and giveaways and stuff that's going on, all focused around VR. And we're involved to some degree and giving away a bunch of prizes and stuff like that. So check that out if you're interested in winning free things.
Giving back to the community. Love it, man.
Sure.
No,
We
yeah.
love the community.
Well, Joel, thank you so much for hanging out with us today and shooting the shit about VR, man. Really appreciate your perspective on this stuff.
It was fun, guys. Thanks a lot. Great times.
Yeah, anytime, man.
All right, guys, don't forget, if you have a viewer takeover intro to send to us for next week's show, I think maybe one in the queue or none in the queue. Who the hell knows? Make sure you send it to withoutparole@gmail.com. Consider hitting us up on patreon.com/withoutparole games for just $1 or more every month. These lights need to stay on somehow. Also, if you change your name to GameCat, hashtag GameCat in the comments below so that we can give you a shout out in next week's show. And if you don't like the questions we talked about this week, the only person you have to blame, that's right, it's you, because you didn't ask better questions. We're blaming the whole thing on you, my friend. So make sure you join our Discord. That link is in the description too. Or leave a hashtag viewer takeover, all one word question in the comments below. We'll seek it out. We'll find it. And maybe we'll talk about it on next week's show. And then we can't blame you anymore. That's on us. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, AJ. My name is Brian. This was Viewer Takeover, and we're out.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
what do we usually do on this show, Brian? I guess I'll answer my own question because usually you ask it to me.
Sure.
But what we do on this show, guys, is that we collect questions from not all over the internet, but two specific places which you can submit questions to. First one, best one, is the Discord. There's a link below. We hang out there all day. Tons of cool game cats in there. And we have a whole channel just dedicated to you guys leaving your questions, comments, anything you got. Otherwise, you can leave a YouTube comment on any video on the channel. I'd suggest going back to Brian's earliest videos just to, kind of see.
You
how
can also
was
leave it
back
on
then.
PewDiePie's channel, man. I'll go skate
Yeah.
over there too.
He'll look at PewDiePie's
What
channel.
is all of this about? Like, what's this hashtag viewer takeover nonsense that's like flooding my
I
channel?
mean,
all of
we
a sudden?
could take over PewDiePie.
We should.
Guys, take over PewDiePie's channel.
Let's
Post
do
him
it.
on PewDiePie's channel. Brian will go look. Anyway.